So the cosmological argument, you said, is the argument based on the beginning of the universe. Can you kind of give a quick summary of what this argument would be?
I can summarize it in just three steps. Number one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Number two, the universe began to exist. Three, therefore, the universe has a cause. And then what you do is analyze what it means to be a cause of the universe. And a number of theologically striking properties come out of such an analysis. It leads to a first, uncaused, beginningless, changeless, timeless, immaterial, enormously powerful personal creator of the universe.
Wonderful. And I do have some questions and some objections to that we're going to talk about here in a moment. And I want to present actually a couple objections that came in on my YouTube channel a few months ago when I had a video related to this. And I told the guy, I said, hey, I'm having Dr. Craig on in a few weeks or months. I'll ask him then. But he kind of presented two main, I guess, objections to the cosmological argument. The first one being,
let's take them one at a time.
Yeah, so the first one being that he says, as it is written, premise one, it commits the black swan fallacy in regards to the premise that everything that begins to exist has a cause. And so he's, I had actually looked up the black swan fallacy. That wasn't one that it was mentioned in my my logic class, but it's this idea that every swan that I've seen is black, therefore every swan is black. And it's kind of, and so, you know, whatever begins to exist, everything I know that begins to exist has a cause, therefore everything has a cause, and this just commits this fallacy. There could be things that are uncaused out there like the universe or something else, and so therefore this premise one is fallacious.
Yes. Premises don't commit logical fallacies, Ryan. The objector here doesn't understand the arguments for the premise. I give three arguments in support of premise one, and two of those arguments have nothing to do with inductive reasoning. My main reason for believing that whatever begins to exist has a cause is metaphysical. I take it to be a metaphysical first principle that being only comes from being. Being does not come from non-being. Something cannot come into existence from nothing. And given that, anything that does begin to exist has to have a cause. The second argument is equally metaphysical. It is that if things could come into being without causes, then it's inexplicable why we don't see anything and everything coming into being without a cause. There can't be anything about the universe that makes it particularly susceptible to coming into being without a cause, because if the universe doesn't exist, there isn't anything to make it susceptible to coming into being. So if things can really come into being without causes, we ought to see this happening all the time with all sorts of things, but we don't. Then the third argument is indeed inductive, and that is that when we survey things that begin to exist, we inevitably find that they have causes that bring them into existence. And we never find any exceptions to this. So this is an inductive inference that is based upon a wide sample and is always found to be the case that things that begin to exist have causes. And so it's not susceptible to the black swan fallacy, which, if that is a fallacy, what that would be is the fallacy of taking too small of an inductive class. It would be like saying that a certain factor causes lung cancer, but you haven't taken a broad enough class of people to draw that inference. Similarly, you haven't surveyed enough swans to be sure that there aren't any black ones. But in the case of things that begin to exist, it's universal in our experience that things begin to exist, don't just pop into being out of nothing. So it doesn't commit the fallacy of having too small a sample class.
Yeah, okay. So this comment just came in based on what your response there was from the realistic nihilist. It says, sounds like you're saying being comes from being. This response kind of begs the question.
I don't think it begs the question. It simply implies that anything that does begin to exist has a cause. I take it, as I say, to be a metaphysical first principle. And first principles cannot be proved. First principles are either simply accepted or rejected. And it seems to me metaphysically inconceivable that being could come from non-being, that something could come from nothing.
Okay. So the comment kind of goes in on from my YouTube channel and says, if even if I ignore that premise one is true, the best the argument gets you is that there's a cause that caused the dead state of the universe. He says, um, uh, um, let's see, we have no evidence that the cause of the universe was spaceless or non-physical. We have no scientific theory that says that. This cause, no, the cause being spaceless, non-physical, or timeless does not follow from the evidence. So how do we get from a cause of the universe to what you said of a spaceless, non-physical, timeless, eternal cause?
This objector has obviously never read my work on the Kalam cosmological argument, in which I go into some considerable detail on the properties of the cause of the universe that we can deduce. In the debates that I participate in, I don't have time to go into that. And so I wait for the objector to raise an objection. But in fact, when you put the philosophical arguments against the infinity of the past together with the scientific arguments for the beginning of the universe, a number of striking properties of this cause will come out. It has to be beginningless, it has to be absolutely changeless, and therefore it cannot be material, therefore it cannot be in time and space. It has to be enormously powerful to bring the universe into existence without a material cause. And so all of those attributes that I mentioned are deducible given the philosophical and scientific arguments for the finitude of the past and the beginning of the universe. And I would plea with the objector here to read my published work on this rather than simply go on the basis of a YouTube video of a debate.
Yeah. Good. All right. So going along with that, kind of the last response is, I think it's important with the cosmological argument to define, I guess, what we mean by universe. He comments here and he says, are you using the universe to describe the universe from which the point of a dense state that this universe began to expand, or are you talking about all matter and all energy and all universes? Matter and energy might not have a beginning. This universe might have had a beginning, this one, but this does not mean that all matter and energy had a beginning. And so his claim is that the arguments for the beginning of the universe that we use, like the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe and the second law of thermodynamics, that only points to the beginning of this universe that we live in, not all matter, time, space, energy. So how would you respond to that?
When I first wrote the book, The Kalam Cosmological Argument, I took the term the universe to refer to all physical reality. That's the way the word was typically used. And the evidence indicates, as I say, that the universe so defined began to exist, is not past eternal. Now, what's happened in astrophysical cosmology since that time is that scenarios of the so-called multiverse have been floated, in which our observable universe is just one small part of a much wider reality called the multiverse. The multiverse would be the universe as I originally described it. The universe is everything that there is physically. So the multiverse is just a different way of referring to what I was calling the universe. So, did the multiverse have to have a beginning? That's the question now. And here I would apply the same philosophical arguments and the same astrophysical evidence to the multiverse, and they will be equally applicable to it. And it will show that the multiverse itself had to have a beginning at some time in the finite past.
Okay, so are you saying then, because I can see like the philosophical arguments for like the impossibility of an infinite regress applying to a multiverse and saying even that has to have a beginning. And I know Jeff Swearing from Reasons to Believe has written a book on the multiverse where he makes this point. But can we use arguments and evidence from Big Bang cosmology to point to a beginning of the multiverse if the Big Bang is only for our universe within that theory?
Yes, we can. Now, I want to underline the point that you just made, though. We mustn't discount these philosophical arguments. For me, it is the philosophical arguments against the infinitude of the past that is the mainstay of that second premise. And the scientific evidence is merely empirical confirmation of a conclusion already reached on the basis of philosophical argument. Now, can we use astrophysical evidence in application to the multiverse? Absolutely. This is exactly what Arvin Board, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin did in crafting their Board-Guth-Vilenkin theorem. This was directed specifically against inflationary cosmogonies that said our universe is just a little bubble in a foam of bubbles, all expanding from eternity to eternity in this multiverse. And what the Board-Guth-Vilenkin theorem showed was that while these inflationary cosmologies have an infinite future, they only have a finite past. And therefore, they do not serve to restore a beginningless universe, even for the inflating mother universe. When Alan Guth says that he believes that the universe is past eternal, it is not on the basis of these inflationary cosmologies. It's on the basis of a model that was developed by Sean Carroll, in which the arrow of time at some point in the past flips over and runs in the opposite direction, so that there is a sort of mirror universe back there. I don't want to say prior to the Big Bang, because it's not earlier than it. Rather, there's a point at which you go back to the Big Bang, and then the arrow of time flips over and runs in the opposite direction. So that mirror universe is in no sense in our past. It does not restore a past eternal universe. Rather, what it gives you are two universes with a common beginning point, each expanding according to its arrow of time from a common origin point, which is the beginning of the universe. So Vilenkin has said quite candidly that there are no successful models tenable today of a beginningless universe. Those that have been offered have been shown to be either mathematically inconsistent or empirically untenable. Indeed, he says that the Board-Guth-Vilenkin theorem gives us good reason to think that such models simply cannot be developed. So quite definitely, the answer to your question is yes, these same astrophysical evidential considerations can be applied to the multiverse as to our observable universe.
That's good. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that.